Observe may have to cut in Celsius in order to deal with this heat wave, but we'll see what happens. We have an amazing program today. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent will be talking with Matt Boyle, our Washington bureau chief, who is just back from interviewing the President of the United States in Scotland. We'll have a discussion with Senator Jim Banks and White House Legislative Affairs Director, Matt Boyle told me I could call him Mr. One Big Beautiful Bill, James Braid. We will also then have a conversation with the Electronics Payment Coalition Executive Chairman Richard Hunt. And then we'll wrap up with a conversation with Joe Livornia, who is a counselor to Secretary Bessent. Thank you all for coming. I'd like to just thank our event partners. I'm going to put on my glasses for this. CGCN and the Alpha Institute. A special thanks to our sponsors, the Electronic Payments Coalition, Charter Communications, Bank of America, Bakai Bank, who have brought a delegation all the way from the Kyrgyz Republic. We have Umut Abakarova and Melis Turgonbayev. Thank you very much for coming, the chairman of the National Bank of Kyrgyzstan. I'd also like to thank Ballard Partners and the Financial Services Forum. I'm glad you could be with us today. Let's get things started with Breitbart News editor, Washington bureau chief Matt Boyle, and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent.
All right. Mr. Secretary, first off, really want to thank you for taking the time to do this. We get to start with the big breaking news. GDP, 3% for the second quarter this year. Numbers out this morning. Blew away expectations. The Trump boom is real. How did this happen?
Well, as I was trying to explain to people who panicked on April 2nd, we're doing peace deals, trade deals, tax deals, and they're all coming together. And a lot of it is just confidence and momentum coming back. That, I was never concerned about what was going to happen. There was a lot of disinformation, a lot of whataboutism. Well, what if we have this inflation? What if tariffs do this? What if that? And I just think the underlying fundamentals and the policies that President Trump's putting in place are incredible. That when you think about the One Big Beautiful Bill, the permanence of that is the confidence that that's going to build. I think it was Al Jolson, after he saw the first talkie movie, said, "You ain't seen nothing yet." Like I think we're just going to accelerate third, fourth quarter, and I think we can go back to the 90s where we had this very strong non-inflationary growth for a decade. Because right now we're also seeing about 1% of GDP in AI spending by the hyperscalers. So all in, they're roughly spending $300 billion a year. And in a perfect world, and world's never perfect, but in my dream world, they would keep spending, and then the AI productivity boom would kick in first, second quarter next year, and we could have something that looks like the 90s that hopefully ends in a better way.
People are excited about this. So the other big numbers that came out this morning, ADP jobs numbers, also better than expected, 104,000. Private sector job growth. You've called the broader picture of the American economy that's been coming together the Trump economic miracle. Talk to us about the ADP jobs numbers, private sector job growth, and the broader Trump economic miracle.
Well, I think one thing that's important here is there's the job numbers, but then we look at the number of jobs for American citizens, and that's really taken off. And somehow in the academic literature, in the mainstream media for years, the one area where supply and demand didn't matter was in low-end labor. We can let hundreds of thousands, then it turned into millions, and then maybe tens of millions of people cross the border, and it wouldn't suppress wages. And now, I think that we've had this horrible despair, especially among young men aged 16 to 35. We're seeing a real problem there. But I think now that we're seeing real wage growth, that good high-paying jobs are coming back, that I think this is just going to build on itself, because a lot of these commitments for the trade deals are for substantial investments in the U.S.
One of the things you mentioned wages. We're seeing wages outpace inflation this year. This is a big deal. I don't think this happened during Biden's presidency. I think this is a unique thing to President Trump's economy. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Look, I think other than, I'm sure the president would agree with me on both, other than the fact he's the most transformative political figure of this century, the other reason he won is because the bottom 50% of working Americans got crushed. That if you go by the standard inflation numbers, PCE, CPI during the Biden years, it was about 18 or 21%. The reported wages for working Americans were about 3% below those numbers, but that isn't the real story, because working class Americans have a different basket of goods and services than everyone in this room. They're dependent on used cars, insurance, rent. They don't have assets. So they probably experienced inflation between 32, 35% with wage growth at 16. So they had a gigantic loss of purchasing power. And so with this administration, we're committed to doing two things. And everyone says, how are you going to fix the affordability crisis? And the first way to do it was to bring down inflation, to make sure inflation doesn't get worse. So in May, we had the best inflation numbers 4 years. They're down. Inflation's down. But as you said, we're going to get real wage growth up, which is what happened in President Trump's first term. In President Trump's first term, hourly workers did better than supervisory workers. The bottom 50% of households' net worth went up more than the top 10%, which might not suit anybody in this room, but it was great for working Americans.
Right. So now, Mr. Secretary, you just got back from Stockholm, Sweden. You were there meeting with the Chinese delegation about trade talks. This is your third such meeting, I believe, with them.
Yes.
Can you talk to us a little bit about what happened there, and then we'll get into kind of some of the specifics about where things go from here on.
Well, what I can tell you is I don't think it's overstating it to say that they were a little on their heels, because the week before, we had just done the Japanese trade deal. Then the day before we began our talks, I know you were in Scotland with the president, Ursula von der Leyen, president of the European Commission, came and did, what's the deal of the century with the EU. So, Japan, EU, we are, I believe, meeting with the Koreans this afternoon. So, our largest trading partners, we have trade deals with. So the Chinese, who like to project strength and under this monolithic view, they were on their heels, because it was like, listen, guys, this is the way it is. And you've got a pretty good deal going, but the rest of the world is now with us. And you're not going to get a special deal. You're not going to get this. The EU is a bigger trading partner. And the more excess manufacturing, I keep telling them that the Chinese have to rebalance their economy. They have the most imbalanced economy in the history of the modern world. They're 30% of manufacturing. They have a current account surplus that's equivalent to 2% of global GDP. We haven't seen that since the 1870s, 1880s, when there was the British Empire. And I just said, the world's with us now, because for a while, it looked in April, May, like the U.S. was alone against the world. Now that we've done deals with our top trading partners, that we have a lot more leverage. And as you know, nobody generates leverage like the president.
That's exactly right. So one of the things he told me that President Trump told me when I interviewed him in Scotland about China, because I asked him about your meetings, which were ongoing at the time when we did the interview a couple days ago. By the way, Turnberry, fantastic property, guys, right? If you ever get a chance, go, please. Like, it's a beautiful, they're right there on the coast. But one of the things he said about China in particular is the goal is to get China to open up. Did you get the sense that they're open to opening up, or their economy to American goods?
They will move at a very deliberate pace. I was in the macroeconomic investment business for 35 years, and I think probably the most overused saying recently is the Ernest Hemingway saying, "How did you go bankrupt? Slowly, then quickly." I think that with a lot of these big economies, that it's a slow process, then it'll happen quickly. Like I remember the Japanese had the bubble burst. They didn't want to do much about it. Then Abe came, President Trump's great friend, Prime Minister Abe, came into office in 2012, and boom, the Japanese hit the accelerator and never looked back. So my sense is that it's not going to be a straight line, that they are doing, they have 5-year planning sessions. They are meeting for the planning sessions. It's called the 5-year plan. They are doing their 5-year plan in September or October. They'll announce the results of that in February. So I encourage them that if they are going to rebalance to more of a consumer economy, to make that known. So we'll see.
So you mentioned the other deals, the EU deal, and that happened while we were there with the president. We saw the Japan deal. We've seen deals with the Philippines, with Indonesia, with Vietnam. Obviously, the United Kingdom. Previously, that was the first big one. And the Prime Minister of the UK came right after our interview with the president. Literally, the staff were yelling out, "The Prime Minister's going to be here in 4 minutes. You got to wrap it up." But Mr. Secretary, one of the things the president told me was that when in the previous administration last year, the world leaders are telling him this, that our country was dead. Like, we were done. Like, we were finished. We were on the decline. And now they're telling him we're the hottest place in the world. I think you were asked about, as a macro investor last night when you were in Stockholm, where would you invest right now? You said the United States of America. Your thoughts on that? Like, is this the hottest place in the world right now?
I think not only is the hottest place in the world, that we've set the conditions to really accelerate that. So I had a very nice life in the private sector, nice office in my hometown in Charleston, South Carolina. Reason I came out from behind my desk was for 2 reasons. I was alarmed by the debt levels that we were seeing, the Biden administration. We inherited a mess, 6.7% deficit to GDP, the highest we'd ever seen when we were at peacetime, or not at war, not in a recession. And then the other thing that I was very worried about was this regulatory state and the amount of regulation that was just being put in the Federal Register. And I think that this deregulation is both a huge amount of economic friction, but it's also a big tax. And I think now, as we're bringing down these barriers, that with the tax bill, 100% depreciation permanent for equipment for the next 5 years. You build your factory in the U.S., you can write that off 100%. We are pushing for energy dominance. So we're going to have abundant and cheap energy. We've addressed, imagine this, like there's an AI czar. When you see the interview with Mark Andreessen and Ben Hurwitz and why they migrated over to President Trump, they couldn't get the two of the greatest venture capitalists of the generation, they couldn't get the White House. the Biden White House to call him back on AI. And now we have an AI czar, that we are having a digital asset event. So I think we are setting the stage for great policies, but also focusing on the jobs of the future. So I'm super bullish on that. And then when you deal, what's fascinating for me now is my job for 35 years as a macro investor was when policymakers met to kind of have my ear up against the door, try to figure out what was going on in the room, what they were saying, what they could do, what they would do, what they should do, and how the market would react. Now I'm in the room and I'm thinking, okay, what can we do? What should we do? What's possible? How will the market react? How will the economy react? And I tell you that the more I deal with the Europeans, that they've just given up. It is a regulatory morass. Mario Draghi, you don't have to read his, I think it's 300-page report. The FT, about 2.5 months ago, did a summary of the report, and he came out and said that the EU internally taxes themselves 100% on services and 50% on goods. The EU was supposed to get rid of economic friction, whether it's in finance, whether it's in technology, whether it's in energy. All the EU wants to do is over-regulate. It is a bunch of supernatural national bureaucrats with no industry experience sitting in Brussels, and they've just given up. And I think now with America, there's just nothing like the U.S. With the innovation, that we are blessed with these natural resources, I think we're going to be unstoppable. I think the Chinese model, their economic model, is starting to implode, that somehow they believe that gravity doesn't apply to them in real estate. They're in the middle of a real estate crisis. And I think that the rest of the world will have had it with just the Chinese pushing out these cheap goods.
Okay, so last thing on trade is that one of the things, so we had our John Carney, our economics editor who introduced us here, ran the numbers. Apparently, the deals that you guys have already made are close to 60% of world GDP. Obviously, we have an August 1st deadline coming up that the president has made clear. If the deals are not in place, then the tariffs are going to go into place even more so then. Do you expect any 11th hour deals? And talk to us about just how consequential this alliance that has basically come together here through these deals that the president's made is for the world economy.
Yeah, so we have 18 important trading partners, 60% of GDP, and then a lot of the GDP we may not trade with. So if I said it in Stockholm yesterday evening, that if there's not a deal by August 1, I would encourage market participants, corporate America, even the countries, not to panic, because you can still do a deal. You're just going to go back to your April 2nd reciprocal tariff level. And it may be on for 3 days, it may be on for 3 weeks, it may be on for 3 months. You can continue negotiating, but back to the president creating leverage, that when the whole world's been at 10%. If you have not come with a good deal, if you have not moved quickly, I can tell you, jumping from 10% back to, I'll pick a number, back to 34% is going to get a lot of attention. Right? And I would expect that it's going to be a busy August.
I want to get into Big Beautiful Bill and the things that are which is now a Big Beautiful Law. So and the things that are in there. But really quick, also today the Federal Reserve is meeting. President Trump has called on them again with these massive economic growth numbers, the GDP numbers that we saw, to cut the rates. Do you expect a rate cut today? If not today, do we expect one in the future? I mean, eventually you'd think they have to do it, but what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm not expecting a rate cut today. The market is pricing in rate cuts. And what I'm hoping that we can see out of the leadership at the Federal Reserve is a little bit of imagination. Because I am told that several members, and the way the voters work, 7 members of the board in DC, and then regional bank governors are selected, and a group of them get to vote. And I think that they will see they were wrong on tariff inflation. And by the way, tariffs, a one-time price adjustment, if it happens, which it hasn't happened, is not inflation, right? And everyone last month, a statistically insignificant amount, the 10 basis points, inflation went up, and the whole world was, see, we told you it's inflationary. It's a rounding error. And by the way, the dollar depreciated 10%. A normal economist would step back and say, well, perhaps that 10 basis points might have been from dollar depreciation rather than we've gone from Trump derangement syndrome to tariff derangement syndrome. So that was a long way of saying I admired Alan Greenspan in the 90s. I thought he was a fantastic Federal Reserve chair through the 80s, through the 90s, because he always had an open mind. Mm-hmm. And I think it's the lack of an open-mindedness that has frozen the Fed, and I am hoping that they will have a more open mind.
All right, so Big Beautiful Bill. Can you lay out for us, which is now a Big Beautiful Law, can you lay out for us the things that are in there that are fueling the next phases of this economic growth? Because obviously the second quarter, I mean, yeah, the president signed it into law on July 4th, but we haven't really even seen the big impacts of this yet. So what's coming in the third quarter, the fourth quarter, the first quarter, and next year as this bill, which is now law, has its big, beautiful impact on the American economy?
Well, I think, and someone who I met in the meet and greet said, Mr. Secretary, when you're out speaking, will you and the cabinet emphasize the power of the 100% expensing? Like this 100% expensing, it is permanent. You can write off 100% of the equipment, and whether it is a new printing press, whether it is a computer, the minute you plug in the computer, you can write it off 100%. We also have, for the next 5 years, the factory structures and farm structures, 100% write-off. And when you think about that, that is very different than the social spending we saw under Biden, where you're handing out money, or it's kind of dead ending in the green project. I don't even remember how many tens of millions each charging station cost. But that is like tightening a spring, because we're creating all this new productive capacity. And as you know, the way countries get rich is through productivity growth. So the after-tax return on capital is going to go through the roof. With the trade deals, we have factories wanting to come back to the U.S., so we're going to see U.S. companies coming in, foreign companies coming in, and we want the jobs of the future. I got in a little trouble when I said, well, we don't want the textile jobs of my childhood in the Carolinas to come back. And look, we're not going to be making socks and towels, But I had the National Organization of Textile Manufacturers come in the other day, and they're now a technology business. That if you are still manufacturing textiles in the United States of America, you are doing flame retardant things. You are making uniforms. You are making Kevlar. So that's the kind of thing I think there's full expensing in the bill, but it's permanent. And that surety is really going to do it. And then I think President Trump also, thanks to his legislative affairs team, got through his campaign promises. No tax on tips, no tax on overtime, virtually no tax on Social Security. When I bought my first car, you could deduct interest payments on cars. So you're going to be able to deduct interest payments on cars made in the US. So on one side, I call it parallel prosperity, because for the past 15 years, Wall Street's done great and Main Street has suffered. And now I think with the one big beautiful bill, both can do great.
So another thing that's in there are these Trump accounts or Invest America. This is for the next generation, right? So a baby's born after the first of the year next year, or I think after the 31st of December this year, get $1,000 in their account that they can invest, and then also any kid I believe under 18, like my brother had a baby last year, so she would be able to have an account that they could open, and people can put in up to certain amounts every year for their child, then they can invest that stuff in the market, and they can learn how to do this. I know you're a big proponent of financial literacy. One of the things we've seen is a number of companies, I think, for instance, one of our sponsors here at this event, Charter Communications, is they're matching contributions into this.
They told me that today. It's incredible.
Yeah, so what do you think? Do you think companies out there should do? It's like a matching 401k or something like that, right? Like, or matching IRA contributions or something that companies do as a benefit. Is that a good thing, do you think?
I think it's a great thing, and I also think that there's a group of the mega billionaires. I think part of this initiative was led by Michael Dell. I think he may be willing to do like a lot of matches. But I think what's important here is twofold, or maybe threefold. One, why are we on the verge of Caracas on the Hudson in New York? Why is this guy getting traction? Because young people are disillusioned with the system. So when you do this, you make everyone a shareholder. You make everyone a stakeholder. People who are part of the system do not want to bring down the system. Well, you saw it earlier. My deep, dark secret, and a lot of people from South Carolina do it, I have a Dr. Pepper every morning. So puts me at the Circle K in Charleston, South Carolina on the meeting in Calhoun. And I'm in there in the morning. I'm dressed like this. A lot of young, mostly African-American men, construction workers, playing the lottery. Mister, when I win the lottery, will you manage my money for me? And I was sitting there thinking, and I tell them, the best thing you could do is save that $20. Now, with these accounts, they can be part of the system. What if they had put that money in the S&P or in Bitcoin or anything? So we're making people part of the system. We are increasing financial literacy. I think that every school, I think that at Treasury, we are going to push with these accounts that if you have the account, we want you to learn about it. We want you to understand it. We want, it's almost like if you get a pet, you understand everything about your pet. So if you have these accounts, like, why are you investing it this way? How are you doing it? How can you understand the power of compound interest? And also at the end of the day, that I'm not sure when the distribution level date should be, should it be 30 and you can buy a house, should it be 60? But in a way, it is a backdoor for privatizing Social Security. Like, Social Security is a defined benefit plan paid out that, to the extent that if all of a sudden these accounts grow and you have in the hundreds of thousands of dollars for your retirement, then that's a game changer too.
So, yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. So, Mr. Secretary, another big thing you guys have done at the Treasury Department, and people, when they think of the Treasury Department, they might not think about immigration enforcement, border security, that type of a thing. I know this is a huge part of the administration's efforts, but you guys have been sanctioning cartel leaders. You guys have been very aggressive on this, and it seems like every day I wake up and there's another press release, Treasury sanctions this guy, sanctions that guy, sanctions this organization. Can you talk to us about those efforts and how you've gone after the cartels?
Sure, and I'll tell you too that part of the discussion with the Chinese, they sell the precursor drugs for fentanyl.
Sure.
If I hear the opium war, we didn't create the opium wars, and that they were able to turn off the supply of rare earth magnets very quickly. If they wanted to, they could turn off the supply of these precursor chemicals. And I have had children of two friends from the richest suburb in America, Greenwich, Connecticut, die of fentanyl. Imagine what we were doing if there were a terrorist organization that were killing 200,000 Americans a year. What would we do to them? We'd wipe them out.
Yeah.
Wipe them out. So we have at Treasury, we have declared the cartels, FTOs, foreign terrorist organizations, and we're coming for them. We sanctioned 3 financial institutions in Mexico, 1 brokerage firm, 2 small banks, and it's just not acceptable. We are taking down what's called suspicious activity report on the border states. We've taken the dollar amount for suspicious activity reports down, and we're going to end this because even forget, like the deaths are impossible to forget, but the lives and the families that are ruined for people who are addicted and just have their futures destroyed.
So, Mr. Secretary, people are really fired up about that.
Well, no, it's very personal for me because, like I said, I had 2 children who I watched grow up die.
Yeah. So on the law enforcement front as well, so we've seen international criminal syndicates engaged in financial scams. There's a lot of financial institutions in this room today and people that represent various financial institutions. What steps do you think this administration, through the Treasury Department, Justice Department, et cetera, are prepared to take to work with the private sector to go after those criminal syndicates who are engaged in financial scams of people?
So we are pushing as hard as we can on cybersecurity. That Treasury, before I arrived, Treasury was hacked. Before I arrived, OCC was hacked. We believe that they were both Chinese hackers, which were brought up during our meetings yesterday, or in the 2 days. So we are holding a tabletop exercise with the regulators. I believe we just did it 2 weeks ago in case of a large-scale cyber attack. And we're pushing as hard as we can on this because, again, with generative AI, that they could just grab your voice and do it. I think my public affairs team, I think, pulled down 30 false Facebook pages of me, of things I said. Somebody came out and said, sell everything, buy this. But I think that for financial firms, it's the real challenge of the day, and obviously older people are more vulnerable, but everybody's vulnerable.
All right, Mr. Secretary, the last thing I want to ask you about, and I want to get a lot into this question, particularly, we are seeing a boom in a CapEx comeback, is what I think you've called it, a boom in capital expenditures in this country. In addition to that, you have a big op-ed this morning in the Washington Post calling for laying out a plan to make the United States the crypto superpower of the world. Can you talk to us a little bit about both of those things here and kind of explain the capital expenditures thing for the audience at home so that I know everybody in this room is going to understand that, but the audience at home so they get it.
Yeah, so the CapEx boom, part of it's to do with AI, but one thing, a lot of people ask me, what surprised you the most, or what have you learned the most since you came into office? And one of the things that surprised me the most is that I often remark Germany, or as I talked about the Europeans, but especially Germany, they were this manufacturing powerhouse, and they'd made the decision to deindustrialize. I think I didn't realize what a decision the U.S. had made to deindustrialize. That through a lot of the overreach in the environmental laws, we were no longer able to build things. And President Trump and we in the cabinet are committed to making sure that America is able to build again. It should not take 8 years to get a pipeline approved. TSMC, the world's largest semiconductor manufacturer, wants to build a gigantic plant in Arizona. They want to expand. One of the biggest national security risks to everyone in this room, to the Western world, is that 99% of the high-performance semiconductors are built in Taiwan. And they're having trouble with building permits. We're having trouble drilling. It's impossible to do an oil pipeline that crosses state lines. So it's a combination of tax policy, but regulatory policy. We want America to be able to build again.
Really exciting stuff. Mr. Secretary, I really want to thank you for taking the time to do this with us, sir, and give our best to the president. So, yep.
Thank you.
All right, folks, we're going to do another panel here in just a second. John Carney is going to join me up on stage, and we're going to have Senator Jim Banks from Indiana, freshman senator from Indiana, and then also James Braid, the White House Legislative Affairs Director, is going to join us up here. So bear with us a second. We're going to get set up, and we're going to get rolling on that here very soon. So I'm going to go over here. So, yep, okay. Yep. Mr. James, how are you, sir? Good to see you. Thanks for doing this. This is fun. So, dude, yeah, it's pretty cool, right? Like, so you're surrounded by Breitbart. So, okay. Folks, we're very excited here to be joined by James Braid, who's the Legislative Affairs Director at the White House for President Trump, and also Senator Jim Banks from the great state of Indiana, and John Carney, our financial economic editor here at Breitbart News. Okay, so first off, guys, I really want to thank you for joining us. I want to get your reactions to some of the things that the Secretary there was talking about. We'll start with Senator Banks. I mean, your thoughts on him talking about the growth numbers. I mean, 3% is just blows away expectations and, the broader vision that President Trump has for the economy.
Yeah, all of the critics were wrong and President Trump was right. And Secretary Bessent made this case so well. The numbers that came out this morning, they prove it. The Trump tariffs are working. Not just the revenue that it's brought in, but what it's doing to restore American manufacturing is significant. And I would contend to you, by the way, that there's no state in the country that's benefiting more from the Trump tariffs than my home state, Indiana, the top manufacturing state per capita in the whole country. Immediately after the tariff announcement, I was so proud to be at the White House for Liberation Day. I've been in Washington now for going on 9 years, and one of the highlights of my time in Washington was to be in the Rose Garden when President Trump signed those tariffs on Liberation Day. And immediately, Matt, GM made an announcement in Fort Wayne, Indiana, where I live, that they were adding more workers, more overtime for workers to build trucks. Eli Lilly, the biggest pharmaceutical company in the country that's headquartered in Indianapolis, makes an announcement of $27 billion in pharmaceutical manufacturing that they're bringing to Indiana and America instead of China and Mexico. On and on and on. The new Honda Civics are going to be made in Indiana, not in Mexico. Made in America bicycle company comes to Columbus, Indiana, because of the tariffs. Announcement after announcement after announcement that we've had in Indiana because of President Trump's tariffs. So it's working. The economy the Trump economy is restoring itself, and American workers are better off for it. So the big point here is that President Trump was right, and all of the critics, and there were many of them in the Republican Party, there were many of them in the United States Senate, they were all wrong. And we're better off for it.
And James, I want to bring you in here, and then Carney, I want you to jump in and ask a million questions of these guys. We're going to have fun on this panel, guys, right? That was the serious stuff. This is the fun panel. So, so James, you've been on that note, what the senator was just talking about there. Yeah, there were critics inside the Republican Party, and they go back a long time. But I think that President Trump, the Republican Party now that they're seeing all of this stuff happen, is more unified behind President Trump than ever before. Talk to us a little bit about, because you're the kind of like the nuts and bolts guy, if you will, that moves the president's legislative agenda through Congress, right? Like the legislative affairs director at the White House, you're in there like working with senators and congressmen and helping make the process go. So the Big Beautiful Bill, which is now Big Beautiful Law, in large part, because of the work you did for the president. But talk to us a little bit about your thoughts on where the party is now.
So I think, and one of the things that we've been thinking about is you're seeing a paradigm shift in the legislature where, great, young freshman members like Senator Banks, Senator Schmidt, a whole, new cohort of Trump-focused and working-class focused and populist-focused senators and congressmen have come in. So the legislature fundamentally as a people, in terms of people composition, has changed so significantly. The ideology and so many arguments, you alluded to, Senator, this tariff argument. Well, it seems like Trump was right about everything on tariffs. That's one leg of the stool. The One Big Beautiful Bill is another leg of the stool, keeping that tax surety, and the DREG is another leg of the stool. Legislators are buying into that vision. And I think the passage of the One Big Beautiful Bill is such a great example of that. Before, if you look in the first term, we were unable to pass the first reconciliation bill, and the second reconciliation bill didn't pass to December. The president, working with the congressional leadership, Speaker Johnson, Leader Thune, was able to keep everybody on the same page, negotiate the deals that needed to be negotiated, exert the pressure that in many cases needed to be exerted, and get it done by July 4th, kind of a great deadline, a great messaging deadline, but not anything that was really significant in the congressional calendar. We just wanted it done by July 4th, and he got it done. And so, the ideology is changing, the people are changing, and the output is changing. And so that's what we're seeing with events like this.
My first question really is for both of you. So we have the One Big Beautiful Bill. The economy is roaring, 3% growth. The inflation came in below expectations in today's report. So what's next on the legislative agenda? What are we doing? What are we looking at for the next 6 months and the next year?
Well, I mean, I think, what the topic du jour is in Washington is how we're going to keep the government open. I think we're hoping that the Democrats do what they did in March and behave responsibly and ensure that, important services continue to remain available for millions of Americans, and they do the responsible thing and keep the government open. I think you saw an interesting event yesterday where there was a little bit of a scuffle between Senator Booker and Senator Klobuchar and Cortez Masto on the floor over some relatively non-controversial police bills. Senator Booker generally felt that they didn't push back enough on the administration. So you had a rare incident of D-on-D violence spill out into public, and that's really what they're facing here on the government funding deadline is, are they going to move responsibly and show that they can cooperate, that they're not afflicted with Trump derangement syndrome? Or are they going to listen to the radical voices like this mayor of New York City that they just elected and engage
He's not
in
mayor
brinkmanship?
yet.
Or soon to be mayor
still have a
of
chance.
potentially of New York City, the socialist. Are they going to engage in that brinkmanship? And so that's really the big thing. And then obviously, I think the speakers said, and I think it's certainly a topic of conversation. We'd like to do another reconciliation bill. We're kind of working on and trying to figure out what that looks like. But I think those are kind of the two big ticket items that are coming up down the road.
One of the threats to the Trump agenda are the federal courts. We've seen them freeze executive orders over and over again. There's actually a threat to the trade agenda as well, where the courts are threatening to say the president doesn't have the power to put on these tariffs. So one question I have, Senator Banks, would the Senate consider legislation to affirm the president's authority in this manner? I mean, they're working. He's doing it through executive orders, through existing legislation that I think he, does grant him this authority. But, just to make sure the courts can't stop it, wouldn't it make sense? Pass a bill that says, yes, President Trump can put on these tariffs.
It makes a lot of sense. And to James's point, I've been thinking a lot about this. The Democrats are so good when they have power of going all in. Right? They do everything that they can do in a short period of time, and Republicans suck at that. Until now, this is the first Republican president we've ever had who plays offense instead of defense. So the Democrats go all in, they pass their agenda, and then when Republicans get a majority, they scale it back 20, 30, 40%, and that's how this game in this town has been played for a long time until President Trump came. So the big message right now is that we have a short window of time to go all in, and we have the president to make it happen. So what do Republicans have to do to make the gains and the successes that we've already had in just 6 short months permanent? We have to codify it. Mm-hmm. Congress has to pass more laws to do it. I say all the time at home and in Washington, this is no time for squishy Republicans. We still have a few of them, not as many of them as we did when I first got to Washington in 2017, when I got elected to the House for the first time when President Trump came in the first term. To James's point, President Trump has substantially changed the Republican Party and the makeup of it. All of those endorsements, all those primaries that he got involved in, like my primary in the Senate last cycle, where he helped shape the historic shift and paradigm shift of the Republican Party and who we are and what kind of a party I think we're going to be for the rest of my life, which is going to be in Donald Trump's image, not in the image of the old school Republican Party. So we have to push back against still a few of the squishier Republicans in our party and advance long-term gains by codifying the executive orders of the Trump agenda to do it. And I think all the pieces are there for us to do that. We have more bites at the apple for reconciliation, which unlocks this magical key that we need to pass bills in the Senate with 50 votes, with the vice president breaking the tie, and then majority. I mean, Speaker Johnson keeps pulling rabbits out of a hat in the House. He has the ability to do that in the House. And I think Leader Thune has shown backbone as well in the Senate. So if we can get 50 votes in the Senate and a majority in the House, and I'd like to see us, for example, Matt, codify the Trump tariffs in a second reconciliation bill. I mean, the revenue that comes from that is significant, and it makes one big thing that President Trump has done permanent, so that the next president if it can't undo it like Biden did
Right.
4 years ago.
The other great thing about actually codifying the tariffs would be the CBO would then be able to score it as revenue. Right now, they don't count it at all.
That's exactly right.
You guys don't get any credit, so they say the one big beautiful bill increases the deficit. They don't count the tariffs, and it makes it much harder to repeal the tariffs from a new president if you have a CBO that will say that will increase the deficit because we'll lose the revenue.
To James's point, though, 2017, it's a history lesson for all of us. The president's elected by the American people to disrupt Washington. He comes to Washington, and he's fighting against a speaker and a Senate leader of his own party who weren't aligned with him. That's totally different today. And the other big difference is, as James pointed out, because of that fight in 2017 with his own party, we didn't get enough done in 2 years to keep majorities. This time, President Trump has said, we're going to do as much as we can, as fast as we can. We're not going to waste a single day. And the positive outcome of the big, beautiful bill is already being felt by our voters at home, giving us the wind behind our backs to keep the House majority, grow the House majority, keep the Senate majority, and keep up this progress for another 2 years.
So there's a couple of things there that I want to zone in on, and James looked at me when he mentioned Paul Ryan, because we were talking about this the other night when we were getting ready for this. There was a moment a decade ago, I think now, right, James? So I've known James for a long time. It was right around the time I think that Paul Ryan was elected Speaker, which was late 2015. And this is before Trump had won the first time he won the primary. I remember the two of us were out at an establishment, I think, called Union Pub in Washington, D.C., a bunch of Republican operatives and media people, and everybody's all hanging out there. And the two of us are the only two people in the whole place that think that Donald Trump's going to win the election next year, not just the primary, but the general election, and that Paul Ryan's not going to last as Speaker of the House. And everybody's looking at us like we're crazy people, right? Like
literally thought we were insane.
Yeah, literally thought we were insane. Well, look at where we are now. And I think that the senator has made a couple of important points here about how it's felt like over the course of this, past decade or so, that the establishment always kind of ekes it out at the end, right? The swamp always wins. It feels like the casino, the House. Now it kind of feels like the things have shifted, and it's tight, right? Like every vote in the House, you see, it comes down to a handful of votes. Every vote in the Senate, it comes down to the wire. But the balance of power has really shifted, and it feels like, for lack of a better way of saying this, the good guys win every time now, rather than the bad guys win every time, right? And so, we saw this at the end of the big, beautiful bill. The media makes a big thing out of this member, and that member's got an issue, and this member's got an issue on this thing or whatever. But at the end of the day, great
anecdote on that, Matt. I remember the day we had 7 successful markups in the House of Representatives. Mm-hmm. It's a massive headline in Politico. Problems piling up for GOP mega bill. And I'm just kind of looking at the situation and going, I don't know. I mean, it's progressing as good as it can possibly progress. So we did get a lot of negative media coverage that was unwarranted.
Right. So how do you take this to the next level in a future legislative package? How do you continue to keep this momentum going? So it's not like the big beautiful bill is passed and okay, we're done for the year. No, we're not. Right. There's still 6 more months in this year. So what do you guys have next on tap?
Well, so I think, you want to continue the momentum of the last 6 months, which, we keep trying to look at and figure out Republican Congresses that have been more productive than this one. I don't think one exists in living memory. I think you probably have to go back to the pre-World War II, just looking at the sheer magnitude of the accomplishments. I mean, the biggest GOP accomplishment of 20 years was welfare reform. Well, this one big beautiful bill reformed 2 larger welfare reform programs. So it's 2x, and that's just a component of the one big beautiful bill. I think what you have to do is, one, members need a little bit of time to take the temperature down. 2, we need to continue to do what we've been doing, which is skillfully negotiate the space between some of the old line establishment that still is in the Congress and the new populist wave, strike that balance and continue to push forward by, having the president, who's a master negotiator, chart the course for the Congress and continue to keep the pressure on for achievements.
Well, I wanted to invite you, as you look forward, when you guys go back to your constituents, I'm sure they're also, while they're very happy, no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, they probably do want to know, okay, and I think this is a mistake the Republicans made back in the first Trump administration. They went into the midterms without a very robust agenda. They were able to say, well, we're supporting Trump, kind of. I think this time there's a much better argument for elect more Republicans than they did last time. I just wanted your thoughts.
Yeah, President Trump has never been more popular in the state of Indiana than he is today. I think to your point,
right.
The proof is in the pudding, and he's been very effective. He's been effective because he's changed the party, and the party is helping him put wins on the board for America. But we got to keep up the progress. We got to make homes more affordable for working class families. It costs too damn much to build a house and to buy a house for any working class family in this country, and we got to bring down interest rates to make that happen, but also roll back regulations and focus on that. And there are a lot of us who are doing that. President Trump is. All the things that conservatives have talked about for decades, President Trump is making happen, like completely dismantling the federal role in education by eliminating the federal Department of Education. We got to make it happen, and he needs legislative help to do that. The secretary and the president are laying the groundwork for it, but Congress has to help.
Are we good? That's actually a great topic. Are we going to see legislation to end the Department of Education? Because the courts have let him fire half of everybody. I don't think they'll let him fire 100%. So is that going to move?
There is legislation. Will it move? We have to have the backbone to make it happen. And I think the administration, the president, and the secretary are doing everything that they can, literally everything that they can to set the groundwork for it. I mean, they've moved student loans to Secretary Bessent's portfolio, which was the biggest part of the federal Department of Education before. So it's that all of the work is being done to make it happen. Why does it matter? I mean, as a dad of 3 kids in high school and middle school, I don't want the federal government involved in my kids' education. And when we talk about long-term gains for our country, this is a significant moment of time to get things done like that the conservatives only talked about for 30 or 40 years that President Trump is making happen. There's so much more. I mean, a laundry list of things that we can and should make happen. We should codify President Trump's immigration policies. I mean, that first and foremost, that should be done, but we still have squishy Republicans in the Senate who are pushing back, and even some Republicans in the House who are pushing for pro-amnesty type legislation as well that we have to fight against. But we need to codify it to make it permanent, to make sure that we don't go back to immigration policy.
I love your point about we don't want the federal government involved in our children's education, because under Biden, the federal government was saying, we don't want you involved in your children's education. So this is 100% turnaround of the paradigm.
Yeah, the Democrats are the best thing that we have going for us. I mean, they are so crazy. I presided in the Senate, the vice president's chair yesterday when the food fight was going on between Booker and the other Democrats, and they are truly crazy, and they are so far off base of where America is that's good for us.
Right.
We have a short period of time to seize the moment, and President Trump is giving us an opportunity to do that, to do more, to do it as fast as we can, and to make it permanent.
Yeah, so on that note, Senator, too, and I would ask this question to both of you guys, but Senator Banks, if you want to answer it first. We're headed into a midterm election here next year. In a normal midterm election after a wave year like 2024, you would see the pendulum almost certainly swing back the other way. That might happen, I don't know. But at this point, it really does look like it's a coin toss as to whether or not which party is going to control the House. And Republicans, if you look at the Senate map, look pretty good at their shot of holding the Senate. It does seem like the way that the Democrats have gone over the course of this, last couple of years during the Biden era, and even this year, I mean, with the Mamdani guy, and they have another one up in Minnesota, this Omar Fatah guy or whatever, total crazy person, right? That they're electing as mayors. or winning primaries, and then they're probably going to win the mayorship. But the point is that it does seem like Republicans have a decent shot to defy history. Your thoughts?
Yeah, totally. I mean, the Democrats are drifting further and further to the radical crazy left. The Wall Street Journal poll, a bipartisan poll, a Republican pollster and a Democrat pollster, Wall Street Journal, over the weekend, said the Democrats have never been more unpopular than what they are today because they're batshit crazy. So that's good for us. Then on top of that, you have what President Trump, no taxes on tips, no taxes on overtime. Who's benefiting from that? The working class voters who used to vote for working class Democrats that realize the Democrats don't represent them anymore. President Trump's Republican Party represents working class voters. So those working class voters are now voting solidly Republican, and that's multiracial. That's across the board all over America. I see it in Indiana. My dad is one of those voters, a retired union factory worker who used to vote Democrat. He's a Trump Republican. He won't ever go back to that as long as Donald Trump is in charge of our party and as long as our party represents working class voters. So that set us up to do very well in the midterms, and we have opportunities in the Senate to not just keep the 53-seat majority in the Senate, but to grow it and strengthen it with good, strong Republicans in primaries to replace the Mitch McConnells of the Senate with much better additions to the Senate that will represent Donald Trump's Republican Party.
I think one important point I would make to just sort of add on to the senator's comments, the bill is retroactive to January 1st, 2025. So not only was it passed by July 4th, which was 6 months earlier than the tax cuts in 2017, it goes retroactive. So everyone who has tips, overtime, Social Security, obviously the rates, obviously the business provisions, they will feel it immediately when they're filing their taxes in April before the midterms. So you're looking at, and I mean, even in some of these blue states where candidly the majority runs through, you're going to see a huge reduction in their SALT expenses. And so, you look at that and say people are going to receive thousands and thousands of dollars in their pocketbooks in April before they're going to the polls. That's going to have a transformative impact on, I think, how the midterms go, because the Republican Party will have delivered material increases in prosperity for Americans, and that typically is rewarded at the polls.
Mm-hmm. And don't forget the Democrats campaigned on no tax. President Trump says, I'm for no taxes on tips, because he believes it. And then Harris and the Democrats say, okay, we're for no taxes on tips too. They had an opportunity to vote for it 3 weeks ago. They voted against it. They voted, every Democrat in Congress voted to raise taxes on working class families substantially. So the American people know that they lie. They don't represent regular, normal, working class Americans anymore if they ever did, and they're going to vote for Republicans as long as we stay rooted in these America First pro-working class values.
Carney, you want to wrap us up?
I think that the timing is actually working out very well for the Republican Party going into the midterms, because we did have this, the panic after Liberation Day. We saw the stock market go down. We have the recalcitrant Fed that refuses to cut rates, but they're going to cut. I mean, I don't know if they'll cut. They're not going to cut today, but I don't know if they'll cut in September. Probably. They're going to cut soon, which means that we will have an economy that is literally accelerating as you go into that midterm election. As you said, we're going to have, the people will be filing their taxes and realizing they're paying lower taxes than they probably have in their entire lives. So this is, I think, a historic opportunity to defy the historic pattern of losing. Just wanted your guys' feedback on that.
I think one point I'd make to that is the map is very favorable. So, there are only 3 Republicans in the House and Kamala won districts. There are 13 Democrats and Trump won districts. Don't want to get too far into this, but obviously we're seeing reporting that a number of different states have decided to pursue changes. And so, I think that there's a great opportunity to defy history. I think you combine, a fairly favorable map with an unprecedented series of legislative achievements. And, I think that one of the things that the Republicans haven't done, and the president's preached very, very directly, is unified. Unity, he's sort of a constant message of unity without the type of infighting that we saw in the first term between the leadership and the president, I think we have an even better chance. So yeah, I do think that the party is well set up to defy history, both because of its achievements, because of the map, and because of the leadership that it has in President Trump.
Thank you. I think that's about all our time. Thanks for being a part of this. And I think this actually is a historic moment, because what we're seeing is, as you guys were saying, this is a united Republican Party. This is a Republican Party that got past the divisions of old and now is working to the future. You guys have been an essential part of that. So thank you very much. As an American citizen, I want to thank you. And on behalf of Breitbart, thanks for being here.
And again, folks, Carney's gonna stay up here. He's got an upcoming discussion here with Richard Hunt from the Electronic Payments Coalition, and then with Joe Livornia from the Treasury Department.
Good.
Thanks. This was really great. Yes. Thanks. Oh, great.
Let's rock and roll.
Yeah. So for our next segment here, I'm going to be talking to Richard Hunt, the executive chairman of the Electronic Payment Coalition.
That's correct.
I'm glad I got that right. All right. And you led the Consumer Bankers Association for a long time. That's where I first learned your name. So what I think people know what the Consumer Bankers Association does, but they might not know what the Electronic Payment Coalition is. Could you just tell us what's the core mission of this?
Yeah, the number one core mission is to make sure Durbin and Marshall don't tell American companies how to process credit cards and take away your credit card. That's the number one mission. Our coalition is credit unions, community banks, large banks, airlines, airports, even unions have joined us in this battle to defeat Durbin Marshall. Look, we use credit cards each and every day. And it's my third favorite topic these days to talk about are the credit cards. And I just want to ask you a couple questions, and the audience a couple questions as well. I want you to think about it in the audience, and I'll come back to you. How many credit cards do you have? Think about that number. How many times do you use it per month? Now think about that second question, not just how many times you swipe it, but how many times you have a bill attached to your credit card. John, how many credit cards do you have?
I probably have 5 or
What do you mean
6.
you probably? You should know exactly how many credit cards you have.
I have 6 credit cards.
What's the number one credit card you use and why?
I use a Marriott Bonvoy credit card it gives me points when I travel to events like this.
So you use your credit card to get hotel points?
Yes.
How many times do you think you use your credit card per month?
Every single bill. So I think I probably use it twice a day. So let's say 60 times a month.
You are above average. Let me ask the audience, how many people have 4 or more credit cards? 4 or more. Okay. And how many times you use your credit card? 38 times or more per month. That is the average. 4 or more credit cards and 38 times per month. I'm much better than average. About time in life, I'm better than average. But it's amazing. For you in the audience, you use your credit card, yes, for safety and convenience, safety and security, but also to build miles. Most of you probably use your credit card for miles. 15 million of you used your points last year to travel around the country. Most people in this country use it for cash back. And all you rich folks in the audience, send your kids to these private schools in DC, that's great. But cash back is very important as we're about to go in to back to school time.
Right, that's a big drain on people's cash. They can use the extra money that's coming forward. Let's talk a little bit about what the Credit Card Competition Act is.
I call it the Credit Card Cancellation Act.
Credit Card Cancellation Act. So why? Why do you call it that?
Because it will cancel credit cards. We do call it at EPC the Durbin-Marshall credit card mandate bill because, look, it's tied to them. They're the ones who are bought off by Walmart and Target and Home Depot to save Walmart maybe a penny a transaction, something you will never see coming back. So they have to own it. So we said if they have to own it, we're going to put their names on it.
Sure, the Durbin-Marshall Act.
Yeah, and look, they're pretty good. Dick Durbin back in 2010 did this on debit cards.
Right.
Some of you may remember back on before 2010, this was during the Dodd-Frank debate, which was going to become Dodd-Frank. You used to get reward points on debit cards. We used to have free checking accounts in this country.
And what happened to those?
Adios. That's what happened to them. And Dick Durbin, it shows you the power that one United States senator can have if they want to use it for their personal benefit.
And that was because they squeezed the banks by limiting the fees that they could charge. So it didn't make sense to try to incentivize people to use the debit card.
Yeah, what they did is they told businesses what they can charge for their service.
Right.
One United States senator went down to the well of the United States Senate, had a sheet of paper with an amendment called the Durbin Amendment, placed it before the president at the time, president of the Senate, said, I want this bill, this amendment introduced. In order to secure votes, he would literally cross out sentences and add sentences back. The consumers never received one dime. Their one promise they made, you would see a savings in the cost of services.
That's right.
Federal Reserve Board of Richmond said it never happened. Now they're back again to tell American companies how to process their cards. Now look, it's two politicians telling American companies how to use their business, how to process their cards in their business. They know nothing about this whatsoever. Look, this is a great gig I have. It's a lot of fun. I've never had more fun in Washington, D.C., and I've been here since '93. But it is truly an idiotic bill. They've not done any research. They've not had any legitimate hearings, period, whatsoever. And this is industry versus industry.
Why didn't Durbin learn his lesson? I mean, the last bill failed to deliver the very savings to consumers that they were promising us.
Because he knows best. And because of Walmart and Target are funding this operation for the mega corporate stores to do this. So we're fighting back each and every day. We've had a terrific fly-in. We're educating members of Congress left and right. This bill has never gone through the process. Even Sherrod Brown, liberal United States senator from Ohio, chairman of the Senate Banking Committee. How many hearings did he have on this bill?
I don't know.
0.
So the
Never
bill,
brought it forward.
so the bill you're saying is not going to move forward.
This bill has not even been reintroduced in this Congress. They're having a hard time finding co-sponsors to do it. It's because of our coalition going to members of Congress saying how this would hurt states who rely on tourism because people would stop flying, credit cards would be reduced. And look, we talk about this credit card mandate from reward miles many ways.
Right.
For many Americans, most Americans, this is their number one way for access to credit, to pay their bills, to make ends meet. Not everybody has enough money each and every month to pay off their bills. So I'd rather them go to a credit card, try and pay it off each month, than payday lending and other places.
Sure,
so it's fun game for some. This is extremely serious for others.
One of the things this gets sold as we need more competition in the credit card space. But we've just had this big merger between Capital One and Discover that's been approved. Shouldn't that at least make them think, well, we're getting more competition. The market's taking care of competition. Yeah. We don't need a government mandate to try to force that on them.
So I'm told in the old days, you used to sell your mule as a form of payment. And then something called cash came about. Then something called checks came about. And something called debit cards. And then credit cards. And guess what happened just a couple weeks ago? The crypto bill was passed. So this is always evolving. This is a highly competitive landscape. Let the best business win. Let the consumers choose how they want to use their cards and their payment system.
Sure, we had the Genius Act. We're going to have stable coins. Yep. That will be another way for people to pay. So I guess your claim is that the idea that the credit cards are a monopoly on payments is a myth because we have a lot of other ways to pay for things.
Sure, even within the credit card space, there's a ton of competition. You know how many offers you get in the mail or email and so forth about how many credit cards that are out there. But this cuts across all banks, community banks, credit unions, large banks. This is just the United States Congress trying to do the bidding for the corporate mega stores.
My wife is a credit card genius.
Genius.
She switches them in and out. Whoever gives us the best offer, that's the credit card that we use. That's why when you asked me how many credit cards I have, I said, 5 or 6, because we change out. But we'll lose that opportunity if they start mandating what the credit card companies can do.
So think about when you use your credit card today. You've got a lot of worries in life. But when you use your credit card, you know that it's safe and it is secure. I can't tell you exactly how the credit card really works as it goes around the world, but you go to the merchant, you swipe your card, it goes to their bank, then it goes to your bank, and then to your account, then it goes back to the merchant, all within 2 seconds. Whether you're in Paris, France, or Paris, Texas, it does not matter. If this bill were to pass, you're going to go to a restaurant and say, I'm going to make this company up, obviously. I wanted to go on the Visa secure network, not some company that does not exist today.
Right.
So the people that Marshall and Durbin want to process your credit card does not exist today. So you would go to a restaurant and say, nope, run it on the Visa rail. Now, I'm sure your waiter is going to have a lot of fun making sure it's on the right rail.
And that's just another, that's something that people aren't really going to learn about, which one is the most secure. And so you are in danger then possibly of having them run it on an unsecured network.
Yeah, we've said that from day one. We said fraud would go up, safety and security concerns would go up, reward points would go away, cash back would go away. It's just a litany of things that would happen in a safe, secure environment. And we've got America 250 coming up next year. A lot of people think this is a Republican and Democratic fight. It is anything but that. We've been talking to the senators from Arizona and Nevada. They know that some 3 million people fly into those states per year using miles. Now, what do they do when they get to the airport? They rent a car. They go to a hotel. They eat out. They're probably going to go lose some money in Vegas since it's 6 to 5 odds instead of 3 to 2 at the blackjack table. So it's a multiplier effect of how this would draconianly affect tourism states.
You were talking about who's behind it, and you said Walmart and Target. So it's not small businesses pushing for this bill. You're saying it's the biggest one.
So the gas station folks hide behind the big guys. All you have to do is look at their disclosure reports that just came out, and it shows Walmart, Target, Amazon, Home Depot, all spending money to support Durbin and Marshall. The same thing they did back in 2010. Look, I don't like how much I have to pay necessarily for goods and products, especially when I go to Walmart, when I go home to Jennings, Louisiana. The last thing I'm going to do is have the United States government determine how much a product should cost. I don't like how much my gallon of gas costs, or my milk costs, or my Twinkies, or my Slurpee. But I don't want the government telling Walmart how much they should charge.
It also strikes me as improbable that, I guess they pitch it as the savings to Walmart and Target and Amazon will get passed on to us.
Never happened.
That seems improbable. It didn't happen with the original Durbin Act. Economics tells us that that's not really the way pricing works. It's supply and demand.
Yep.
So if you give them this break, it'll probably help their shareholders, but not help the consumer.
Yeah, look, we saw that. The Federal Reserve Board of Richmond came back and said that consumers did not receive any savings whatsoever. Now the merchants blame the Federal Reserve, and the Federal Reserve would dictate who would be able to participate in the new rail system.
Right.
So here's Congress, who doesn't usually like the Fed, telling and the Fed says, if it's in the national security interest, then you can offer the card. You tell me the definition of national security interest coming from the Fed. You remember the Biden folks really weaponized the United States government with Marshall and Durbin. They went to the CFPB. As soon as the airlines came out in opposition to the legislation, they went to the CFPB and Rohit Chopra and said, you need to investigate reward miles. Then they went to the Department of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, and said, you need to investigate reward miles. Then they went to GAO. It just shows you to the extent the other side will go to try and win this debate, weaponizing the government under the Biden administration.
So we have some, people at home watching right now, not just in this room. And so, what's your message to people at home? If you had to sum it up, what this bill will do.
Watch your wallet. Hands off my rewards. Don't let Congress and politicians take away your access to credit, your access to reward points. Your safety and security of your payment system is at risk, and they're going all out, I assure you, to try and take your credit card away from you as it operates today.
Richard, thanks so much for being here. I really appreciate it. I think it's been very educational.
You need more credit cards. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you. Thank you.
Yes, this is great. All right, I hope you'll all stick around for the highlight of the day, which is we are going to be talking to Joe Livornia, counselor to Secretary Bessent. Joe, thank you for being here. We'll let him come. All right. All right.
John, how are you?
Jumping on
Thank
stage.
You. Yeah.
That's
I don't
the
know
kind
if
of
my
energy
boss
we
wants
need.
to hear that it's the highlight of the day. So
He's busy. I heard
we're
he's in
strike
meeting.
that from the record.
No, this is thank you so much for doing this. It's really great to have you here. I've known you for several years now.
Yeah.
I actually wanted to start a bit. You've been in the private sector. You've been in the government before. And I wanted to just you're in Treasury now. You were at NEC before. What's the big difference?
Somebody on X said, that Livornia guy's got another job again. Most of my career was at Deutsche Bank, and then I worked for a French boutique and went to the White House, took a year of absence, went to the White House, worked for Larry Kudlow as the chief economist of the National Economic Council. And then after that year was up, that was the COVID year, I went back to my old firm and then actually went to a large Japanese bank, Sumitomo, 10th largest bank in the world. And that's how I actually got to know the secretary as a client of ours.
Oh, interesting.
Because he was obviously a big FX person and knew a lot of the senior executives in my bank. So it was very serendipitous. And that's where I am now, obviously.
Is the job, did you, obviously you love the job you're doing now. Just wondering, what is the big difference between when you were advising Larry Kudlow as the chief economist of the NEC to what you're doing now as the counselor to the secretary?
Really, actually not that different. Because it was sort of like, okay, I reported to Larry, and Larry had daily conversations with the president. It's the same thing with the secretary. So I don't think in that regard it's that different. It's kind of keeping my boss kind of up to speed on what's happening, and then obviously working in the ad hoc projects he gives me, and then kind of marketing and trying to brand the view, because if you don't take control of the narrative, somebody's going to take it for you. So it's not that different, other than the fact I like the Treasury building more than the EEOB.
It's a beautiful building.
Yeah.
Amazingly, Janet Yellen didn't even want to go there anymore, and you guys reopened the front door.
Yeah, apparently also her office was done in some bizarre motif I had heard. Not that I was ever in it, but I don't know if that's true, but that's the rumor.
So big picture, we got the GDP numbers this morning. How would you describe the economy right now?
Economy is in great shape, and the equity market reflects that. You're seeing the corporate earnings come in very strongly. You're seeing the tariff effect fairly de minimis. I'd argued before I took this role that the private sector, the uncertainty was largely about tax policy, that several weeks at most of trade uncertainty, even though it was intense, was not going to change the world, because everything was fine up until about April 2nd, and then for a couple of weeks people got nervous. But what they were concerned about is what's happening with tax rates, what's happening with corporate tax policy, all those things that really have bigger effects on how the economy is going to behave. You can't plan for the outlook if you're going to have the largest tax hike coming in 2026. So that, to me, John, was the big factor. Now that it's surpassed, now that we're done, we've got that passed, I think the markets are accurately reflecting what should be a boom, 3% type of growth, and that should allay some of the concern, although I don't think all of it, although I wish it would, from the deficit worry warts, because growth is central. If you don't have growth, you don't have anything. And I think other things the administration is working on will even get the deficits even better over time. But the growth numbers are reasonable. So the answer to your question, we're on the cusp, I think, of a real strong economy, just like we had back in 2017, 18, and 19 before the pandemic hit.
Well, here's a trick question then. So why does the president want interest rates to be cut? Well, if we're doing so well, yes. Usually the Fed cuts when things are going wrong.
Well, basically, I'd say there's two reasons. One, if you look at the interest-sensitive parts of the economy, they're on the softer side, in particular housing. Structures, which are plants, factories. Now, they're going to get a lift from the One Big Beautiful Bill. And then manufacturing. So you have housing, structures, manufacturing. Interest rates are going to impact those sectors the most. So we could do better if rates were lower. That's one reason. And the other thing is, look, think of it sort of like a garden. Economy is an ecosystem. It's a garden, and you've got very good soil. You've got a very good foundation. You've got really great seed. You've got a really good gardener,
President
president, but you also need water. I think pun is intended. You need the liquidity from the water. Well, the water's like the interest rates. The interest rates are going to grease the skids of commerce. And you can see that rates are much too high by the Fed's own admission. If you look at where the funds rate is, it has been above consistently and well above the high end of what they think is a neutral rate for about 3.5 years. Number two, the yield curve, the 10-year note, has been trading below the upper end of the Fed target for 3 years.
Right.
That's a record. And then lastly, if you look at the Fed's inflation forecast, they had numbers in March that were above 2%. They actually went higher in the June forecast. And what's happened? Inflation's actually gone the other way.
We had a downside surprise in inflation. It came in below expectations. Jerome Powell has actually said that he would be cutting if not for the tariffs, but he doesn't seem to be learning the lesson that the tariffs are not inflationary.
It is a price level adjustment. It is a price level adjustment if there is actually an effect.
We haven't even seen the price level.
We've not seen the price level adjustment. People are making the argument that there's lags and all these other things, which is fine if you made that argument from the get-go. But February, March, April, May, June, 5 months in a row, the numbers have come in weaker than expected.
The Federal Reserve's own research actually showed that whatever price adjustments happened in 2018 happened very quickly. It was almost instantaneously. So this lag story that they've come up with, they have to sell out all the current inventory.
Right.
That's just ad hoc. That's made up.
Yeah, it seems to be made up. I mean, the demand looks like it's coming back. I mean, companies just, if they're paying a higher price, you would think they would at least start to, they got that inventory then pre-tariff. Well, you'd start, if you think tariffs are going to be there in some effect, which the president's been very clear on there will be, you'd start still marking your price. Maybe you don't do the full amount, perhaps, because maybe you're being overly optimistic and think they're not going to happen. The president's not serious with what he wants to do, but that doesn't make any sense, John.
So one of the things I want to talk about that was also a surprise, besides the low inflation, has been dollar has weakened this year. A lot of people said it was going to strengthen if we put the tariffs on, and that would actually undermine the effectiveness of the tariffs because the dollar would become so strong it would overwhelm whatever the tariffs are. So now people are having a different fear. They say, oh no, everybody's going to abandon the dollar. Dollar supremacy's over. We're not going to be the reserve currency. What's your reaction?
It's like what I told people back in April, like the world only ends once. It was like, I think people who are sophisticated, highly educated, who are in markets wouldn't get so emotional about things, and clearly they have been. The dollar, a lot of the weakness has been in the euro. So if you look at DXY, that's one people tend to look at quite frequently in the financial markets. It's like 6, I think, or 7 currencies, and the euro has over 50% weight. If you look at it in broader terms, the dollar is not as weak. So I just want to say the dollar is still strong. But importantly, the demand for U.S. assets remains at record high levels. The passage of the Genius Act, which is now basically setting up the regulatory structure for all sorts of things crypto and blockchain related, and using stablecoin as a payment mechanism, hugely positive for the dollar.
Right. Let's actually explore
in the Treasury's
that.
own data, I just want to say one other thing, John. The Treasury's data show record demand for U.S. assets and Treasury. So this notion somehow that the dollar is weakening in any appreciable way, structural way, couldn't be further from the truth. And the things the administration is doing is only going to further solidify it as the ultimate reserve currency.
The stable coin, this is something that I hadn't thought about before, but it's going to create a renewed demand for Treasury. There's now, because they have to back it with, with dollars, we will now have a new customer base for the debt of the U.S. government.
Right. That's exactly, and that's why, like right now, if you look at, I guess, the funds that are tied to stable coins, I think it's something like 250, 300 billion, of course, up from nothing a couple years ago. And the secretary's mentioned this could be a couple of trillion or 3.
Right.
Market. So there's tremendous innovation. There's just a lot of excitement. I think when you asked earlier about where the economy is going, you can get into Make America Great Again, or I think the golden age or the golden era. I get to use them interchangeably. I think it's a very can-do optimism.
Well, what
we haven't had in a while.
Yeah, I think that's right. We're starting to see it in the surveys. People are starting to feel better about the economy. One of the things that we discussed a little, Matt Boyle discussed a little of the CapEx comeback with the Secretary. While they talked about some of the drivers of that, I think there's another step to that, which is usually when you have CapEx, that leads to greater employment.
Right. So CapEx, you first make the commitment in the capital, and then you make the commitment in hiring the worker. And the more capital you have per worker, eventually you could pay workers more because they've got that extra capital to produce the goods and services that people want, which was a lot like what we saw under President Trump's first term. And of course, you go back to Reagan, you saw the same thing. Really supply-side driven policies. Growth does not cause inflation. And if you give people the ability to produce more, they can get paid more, and then the end user, the consumer, pays less.
Right, this should drive up productivity,
That's exactly
which allows workers to be paid more in a non-inflationary way.
So if you think about it, we've got all this AI investment, right? This incredible boom, and also the adoption of these technologies is happening much faster than I remember living through the internet boom, which was a neat thing. You could get data and you get information quickly. Wasn't obvious how we were using it in such an efficient way. Now with AI, it's clear that it's a game changer. So this notion somehow that productivity is going to weaken toward 1%, according to the CBO, no wonder their deficit numbers are so horrific. I mean, maybe it's right, but boy, what do we just go through another pandemic or something? Why would it be so weak? It makes no sense.
They have extraordinarily weak numbers, and we just got a 3% number. Do you think we're going to be able to carry on at that level of growth in the next year or two?
I do, John, because in the first 3 years, annualized GDP was 2.8%. And to me, the productivity trend is better now than it was in President Trump's first term. The policies reinforced the first term. There's more deregulation, and I think the taxes are just much more powerful, especially with the expensing for plant and equipment.
Sure.
And there's certainly more of an effort to try to get government spending down, and to the extent we can, get the government out of people's, get it out of the way. So yes, I think we could do better. And by the way, in the last year of President Trump's term, and by the way, remember, he wasn't as harsh now on Jay Powell as he was then, but he was correct. Rates should come down.
Right.
And the Fed was slow to cut rates back then. They did come down, and the economy in that third year grew almost 3.5%.
So that's the positive side. What do you think might be the biggest risks facing the economy over the next 2 or 3 years?
Probably something that's beyond our control, maybe something on the geopolitical side, although the president's very unique in that he's
keeps making peace everywhere.
Well, that's right, and he doesn't want to get involved in foreign skirmishes, and really wants to be very thoughtful in how we approach foreign policy. But I would say something that is probably, maybe we're not thinking of, it's sort of not directly in control of policymakers. Or, I could put it another way, everybody always asks that as if it's a negative. Maybe we do get a 4% growth. Maybe we're really, truly on the cusp of this boom. And we grow our way out even faster than what we're assuming. Maybe that's the risk. The risk is that we're not optimistic enough. I mean, it's possible.
So there's upside risk to the economy. We could be growing even faster, which would really help solve the debt problem. And the Secretary said that's one of the things that got him into politics, brought him in. If we're growing at 3%, the debt problem is not a problem.
Yes, if you take the CBO's last published forecast, you could back out what they're thinking now when they scored the tariffs and when they scored the one big beautiful bill. But essentially, in broad terms, the difference between 3% GDP and 1.8% GDP over a 10-year period, with the revenue share of GDP stable where it is now, is $4 trillion. And then the tariffs could be another 3. I'm not going to say that we could cut the debt by $7 trillion in the next 10 years, but the point is just the math is very powerful when you've got compounding and you're growing at a more plausible rate than what CBO has penciled in.
If you had to sum up the economic vision of the Trump-Bessent Treasury Department, what would you say?
Really just getting the economy to work for everybody. And what that means is encouraging businesses, especially small businesses, which are a lot of times the backbone of the economy. The Secretary's talked about community banks. I mean, really an economy that helps everybody, but in particular helps those that have been at the greatest disadvantage over the past few decades. So when the Secretary mentioned, I know President Trump was very proud as well in the first term, when you looked at income, median income rising as much as it did, and in relative terms, the middle and lower incomes performing better than the upper and high incomes, that was very important. So it's an economy that's really egalitarian, and it's meritocracy, but really an emphasis on trying to help those people that really deserve it the most and creating those incentives for them to succeed.
Joe, thank you so much for
Thank you,
doing
Kyle.
this. This has been great. And I wanted to thank everybody here for coming, all of our sponsors and partners on this. This has been a really terrific event, I think one for the history books. Thank you very much.